Welcome to CWS Christian Writing and Speaking. I'm your host, Jackie Wilson. And today's guest is going to share the story of how he overcame his addiction. He started drinking alcohol at a young age, and he soon realized after that he had confidence he had never had before. However, it led to multiple rock bottom moments. But according to him, rock bottom just was not enough to help him overcome his addiction. And although he had unsuccessfully gone through multiple programs, he still wanted to know the peace and freedom that came along with being addiction free. And he said it was finally that he encountered the grace of God, knowing that he was forgivable after all the things that he had done, that he knew that he no longer had to hold on to this addiction. Shame played a big role in what it was that was his life. But when he gave God control of his heart, became contrite, he became the person that we will see today. Today's guest is Mr. Doug Sweeney. Let's welcome him to the CWS stage. Welcome, Doug.
Good morning, Jackie. Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate
Yeah,
this.
absolutely, Doug. Of course, you know, how we overcome things is so important. So many people are in this situation. And a lot of times people think that would never be me. But we never know what life will throw at us. For you, it was drinking at a young age. For somebody else, it may be going through a hardship and they start drinking alcohol. But regardless, the end can be the same for everybody. And that is being able to overcome through the work of Jesus Christ. So, Doug, will you share your story with our audience?
Yes, and I will do the best that I can. My developmental childhood was walking on eggshells. I grew up in a family of hostility,
Mm.
anger, and many forms of abuse between physical and emotional. As a child and developing all through adolescence up until I was 18, I internalized the situation and just considered myself of no value and not having any worth or anything. So at a very young age, and there was, of course, functional alcoholism in my home with my father. And so at a young age, I started to gather up, when he would pass out, I would take some of his beers and then save them up and then drink them, of course, all by myself. And when I realized the effects of that, I instantly gravitated to that coping mechanism and I drank. And as I got older, it just increased. It increased into liquor, it increased into various drugs, and I started getting in a lot of trouble. I got in trouble at school because I was consuming at school even. And then into my early 20s, I started getting DUIs, getting into car accidents, and all kinds of things like this. And so when I would get out of jail or get out of the hospital, I would try to figure out a new way or a new method to consume and be functional. I was winning victory in the fact that I wasn't abusive or mean like my father, but I wasn't winning victory in the fact that I could not stay out of a hospital or out of jail from it because I just consumed so heavily. So finally, after so many of the rock bottoms, as Jackie mentioned, I finally came to another one that went even lower. I got into an accident with an associate. He really wasn't a friend. He was the ex-husband of the woman that I was dating at the time, and he and I went to a bar and we drank all live long night at the bar until it closed. I was taking him home and I did not succeed fully in taking him home. We had an accident close to about 2:40 in the morning. The car rolled several times. We were both ejected from the car. He was killed instantly on the first roll, and I was care flighted to the hospital. I had no, up until this very time, this has been almost 20 years ago, and up until this very time, I still have not, nor will I ever, I believe, have a physical memory of this. So by the time I woke up in the hospital, he had already been buried. I was being told about this by my mother, and I thought that it was scare tactic because I had already been in so many accidents. I couldn't believe that this would happen. I can't believe that I would survive another one because I had already survived so many things. But I did. I survived this. And when I was in the hospital for almost 2 months. And when I got out of the hospital, it was another area that I just couldn't believe that I was the operator of this vehicle, because if I was the operator, why would they even let me out of the hospital? So I was out of the hospital for 3 months before they finally had a grand jury pull an indictment together to lawfully charge me of aggravated vehicular homicide. Then they came to get me. So when they came to get me, you have to understand, in this 3 months between exiting the hospital till they came to get me, I was living in this atmosphere and this mentality of, what am I going to do? How could this happen? It was breaking my heart, and I was constantly crying out to God in my heart. How could I survive? How could you let me survive? I didn't have children. I had never been married. I owned nothing of any monetary value. I had never owned my own home. This man had a son. He had a 9-year-old son in whom I was helping raise. He lived in my house with his ex-wife, the woman I was dating. So this was really personal to me in a way. I believed I was very likely the operator, even though I didn't remember it, because it was my car and I knew how I was in my life. I didn't let people drive my car. I was just fighting with God for 3 months about this. How could I do this? How could you let me survive and not him? And then when they take me to jail, one day while I'm in the dorm at jail, they offer a Bible study for the inmates that want to go. And I wanted to get out of the dorm. It was chaotic, loud, fighting, everything that I hate about jail. And I went to the Bible study, and I came back from the Bible study, and mail had already been passed out. That day, I wasn't expecting mail, but I got a letter, and the letter was from the man, the victim in my car accident. It was from his mother, and his mother wrote me in a way that was completely and thoroughly inspired by God. And it was evidence of an answer to my crying out, that she told me in this letter that she stood with my mother at the foot of my bed in ICU, praying for my survival an hour and a half after finding out about her own son's death. And God knew that he could not show me forgiveness in any other way. And that's what I was fighting with, is how could I be forgivable? How could I be forgivable? Because I had already, we would be here for weeks on end if I told you how much I had already done prior to that. But I just couldn't believe in being forgivable after this. So he showed me perfectly in that letter that I was. And therefore, from that moment on, I knew the evidence was going to win, and that I was going to be convicted of this crime, and that I was also going to prison carrying my Bible and learning the word and learning how to walk with God and build a relationship that he obviously and personally wanted to show me. And so I did. It was an F2. I was facing 8 years. I was blessed. It got dropped down to an F3, and then I was facing 5, and I got 4 years. And I went into prison, and I had already been to prison before for drug possession and other things, small little things. This was the greatest offense I had ever had. And therefore my security status went up to close, which is 1 level down from max. But it was the right camp. It was the right atmosphere. I had the right job. I had the right things that I needed for God to walk with me. That forgiveness that he showed me in that letter was about to evolve into another great early teaching that I needed to walk with him. And that was, he let my heart know that I also had to forgive. The word tells us to forgive as we have been forgiven. But I had to forgive, and I didn't have anybody to forgive other than my Father. So when he taught my heart this, I was just astounded. I was astounded because the word says that, not just to be fair, but there is true healing in that. I had to forgive my dad of all the shame, the embarrassment, the introverted, no confidence in anything for so many years, for the pain and the abuse that he put on my mother and my brothers and myself, for the fear that we always walked in and everything. I had to forgive that, because it was in forgiving that I could grow and mature and hear more value and more principle in his word and become free. And that's what happened in those 4 years that I was at a close security correctional facility. I was more free in there than I had ever been anywhere in life. All praise to him for that, because he taught me so much. He instilled love in the essence of what 1 Corinthians 13 says. It is everything about the love that I never knew. And from that moment on, I follow him.
Powerful story. Absolutely powerful. Because now you're taking, not only are you taking this testimony to different shows, you are helping other men overcome. Can you tell people about your website and what you hope to do?
Okay, so my website, basically, I want to say that addiction in its essence is idolatry. Idolatry is anything or anyone that captures our hearts, our minds, and our affections more than God himself. And that goes everywhere. The first thing we think about when addiction pops up is drugs and alcohol. And a large part it is, but it can be anything. It could be addiction to pornography, shoe buying. We can idolize and wrap our hearts. Our hearts are idol factories. And so what I became able to do is have a website built. And the opportunity that I had this, I thought, what would you have me do, Lord? And so for 10 months, almost about 9.5 months, I've slowly had this website built, and I have content to go into it for men, adult men who are either knowingly in addiction or think that they could be in addiction because the symptoms are there, the problems, the lack of control. I intend to deliver the way that I became free, and that's with the biblical foundation of and his principles in God's word. It's not something that the world offers. It's not something like a 12-stepper or anything like that, because it's my belief that there isn't true accountability in there. The world wants to say we have a disease, and the world is right in a sense that we do. We have a sin disease. Alcoholism is something that we invented. God called it drunkardness. And it's something that I created this site to help men and to walk with them and to use myself as the example in every step of the lowness that I was in with it, to compare and to show how you can be free. And it's freedom at its core. It's not just not having the problem, but it's so in my curriculum, the first two things that I really want to deliver are identifying the bondage. My website is called breakingbondagefromaddiction.com, but the bondage is first of all defined as a mastery. It's an enslavement. It's a state of being bound. So for all of my young life and for way too many years, I was bound by shame, by fear, by zero confidence. I had no value, no worth. Anything I ever did was going to be messed up, or it was going to make my life worse. So those were my bondages. It was those bondages that made me feel the way I felt until I found the alcohol and the drug that I soon coped with and medicated, until that was the only way I knew how to function, was be under the influence. So it's going to be identifying the bondages and working through them. And second most vital principle in my eyes is the forgiveness factor, is believing that you are forgiven, and therefore just as equal that you have to forgive. I will almost shout from the mountaintop that there isn't an active addict out there that holds unforgiveness in some element. And you have to forgive. You have to forgive, because that's where the true freedom is. And it's not easy, and it's not instantaneous. It's a process. It's a journey, but it's a journey that proves itself, and you got to keep going. You got to keep walking through it without stopping.
Yeah, it's a lot. And man, I encourage people, if you heard his testimony and you can relate, you have to connect with him. Doug, what's next for you?
So next for me is this week, every week I'm putting out a blog, and I started my first blog this week on my blog page. And the title for this one was prayer. And I don't know why. I just, I thought prayer, my gosh, this goes without end. We always need prayer. But I wanted it to be the first blog page that any potential overseers of my site read, because I think it's the first step of action anybody, and of whom I used to be and was for too many years, has to actually engage with. You have to engage with the faith that we all have. And we do that by prayer, and we do that by crying out to a merciful, holy God. Why is he merciful and hopeful? Because we wake up each day with new breath. Our heart constantly circulates blood. It doesn't stop. And so our prayer really shouldn't stop. And it doesn't. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17, I think, is that we should pray without ceasing. And so I wrote a blog page about prayer, and I would like any man just wants to pray about what I offer. And I have a free PDF for the scriptures that are relatable to alcohol addiction or to addiction, period. I don't want to specify on alcohol. I want to help all men who are in substance abuse addiction. And I want to put myself out there in full. I mentioned earlier, this has been about a 9.5, 10-month process. And I just want to say I've been sober for many years now, but I have relived a lot of this to go back and do this. And this has been an emotional roller coaster, but it's going to be so worth it to help and lead, a man who is tired and who has lost so much, just to lead them and help them the way that I know it can be helped. And so that's my goal. I have this PDF, and I also welcome everyone else to just schedule a Zoom call, a free Zoom call with me. It's not bound by time, and I have a 14-hour window about 6 days a week. And I just welcome you. I welcome you. Let us talk. Let us discuss. I'm ready for any question. And that's what I offer.
Doug, can you tell people how they can connect with you? You mentioned your website.
My website is breakingbondagefromaddiction.com. I know it's long right now, but I'm new to this, and I plan to sharpen things up in the future, but that's how they can reach me. And like I said, I have an about page, a landing page, everything that I offer. The content isn't so much inserted right now because I want to communicate with the people who schedule a Zoom call with me to introduce themselves and see what they need, what they want. I have all the content right here, but I want to build according to what my community will need. I will do this one-on-one, and I plan to do it in community in both facets, both ways.
It's wonderful. People, make sure you're connecting with him. And Doug, as we wrap up your interview today, what is the one thing that you want to leave with people? The one thing that they can implement into their life today?
I want people to know it doesn't matter, because addiction, I just want to say, first of all, addiction takes you so low. It takes you so into the frame of unforgettable embarrassment, shame to no limit. And it doesn't matter. None of that matters. All that matters is that we can believe that Christ was victor over every sin that we have committed, and we have forgiveness. It tells us those in 1 John 1:9 that he is faithful to forgive us when we confess our sin, and that it is no more remembered. It's as far as the east is from the west. And he wants that. He desires that. I always understood God. I always had a God conscience, but I always understood God as a big law slapper, someone who was going to be done with you the more you committed. But he's always been there with open arms. And when we can sense that after we believe that by faith and reach out to him, then those are the times that we are not to stop. We are to continue going. And so I just want to say that everything that I do in my life, I'm not content for the success to be godless. I think every form of success that we do and proact should be full of God and kingdom concepts. Everything is about the kingdom of God.
CWS audience, you have heard Doug. If you are struggling or even know somebody that is struggling, please share this episode with them. God is merciful. He is full of grace. He wants to forgive you, and you need to forgive those who have led you into these acts, this addiction, whatever it may be. The freedom is yours for the taking, but you have to choose. Do as Doug said, start crying out to God. Pray. You don't have to pray a specific way. Just start telling God about what is going on inside of your heart. He is waiting for you to invite him in so that he can break you free. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And until next time, beautiful people, God bless.
Thank you, Jackie.